Tim Pool revealed something that I'm not necessarily sure a lot of people were aware of, which is that he was about to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he did. Didn't apparently go as planned, but I guess he brought up Israel to Benjamin Netanyahu. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in this meeting, frankly. But here he is explaining it to his audience, being fully transparent about this meeting with the man who's committing genocide right now.
Being fully transparent after, we should be clear, being fully transparent after news of it already leaked, and it was published in an article where his name was included in the list of influencers who met with Netanyahu. I
was being facetious, but I appreciate that clarification.
Just want to make, I had a feeling, but I wanted to make it completely clear.
My having left this meeting is they are clueless to the issue. They don't know, despite the fact there was literally a protest outside, they were dismissive of. They say these things happen. The trends that I see are younger people are increasingly anti-Israel, and on the right, they're relatively neutral or don't care. My prediction, as I made over a year ago, is that with the anti-war elements of the populist movement on the right and the anti-Israel section of the left, not to mention there is a smaller but still prominent anti-Israel right, Israel's not going to have support from this country in 20 years. The U.S. is going to say, we've got two factions. Young people on the right who are following in the footsteps of MAGA populist movement who don't want to fund foreign wars, they vote no on Israel. The far left that hates Israel, they vote no on Israel. Israel, you get no funding anymore. That's what I see happening.
I think that's fairly obvious when you talk to any Zoomers. They're clearly not pro-Israel. They look at the United States and say, look, we have our own problems here. And they look at our history of, foreign adventurism, and they're like, this hasn't worked out for me personally. I can't afford this. I can't pay bills, or I can't have a nice place or whatever. So I think it's fairly obvious, right?
I think it comes from a lack of education on how foreign policy actually works, and the fact that you literally cannot survive in this world without allies. 10 guys show up to beat you up. Are you going to fight them all by yourself? No, you need friends.
Phil might.
What's that?
What? I said Phil might.
Phil might. Yeah. But you see this from people in Congress too, that they just don't understand how foreign policy works. I think is really unfortunate. But the other issue to what you're talking about with the lack of.
Sorry, we just need to pause. We can go back to this. We need to be so sophisticated, and the way we get sophisticated isn't like, I thought he was going to mention maybe like trade routes or something like that. But it was, imagine you're going to get beat up and you don't have a crew behind you. You need friends.
It's a little
sophistication.
But when we're not talking about Israel, these guys are all about isolationism and America number one, and we don't need anybody else. And they should be groveling at our feet, coming to us.
You don't know how foreign policy works.
I don't. I guess. I don't know who. I know who Tim Pool is. I know who Phil from All That Remains is, and I know who. But I don't know who that other guy is. But I'd like to know what that other guy is.
Higby?
I don't know who that is. That name sounds familiar, but I would love to know his opinion on our support for Ukraine, because I know what Tim Pool and likely Phil's opinion on that is. It's probably a bit different than we got to support Israel because we need allies. It's more probably like Ukraine needs to be groveling at our feet enough, and the funding of Ukraine. I'd love to know what these guys feel about that one.
Well, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
In that sense, they're just mirroring the average Republican politician's viewpoint on the issue, which is to speak a lot about isolationism, a lot about not funding, foreign wars and spending that money at home, because that was, mainstreamed in the Republican Party largely by Trump in 2016. He was one of the first people to start really speaking to the sham of the Iraq war from the Republican side. And that opened the floodgates for a lot of sentiment that people were feeling, which is that how come we're spending all this money overseas and the roads outside my home look like garbage, right? And the right wing has used that wedge to further their neo-fascist aims, but they want you to carve out an exemption for Israel that doesn't make sense in their ostensible worldview, but makes sense when you understand that the Democrats, they're taking large amounts of money from military industrial contractors and the military industrial complex in the form of AIPAC money. And they've set the stage for this particular situation where not just the left, but the right is becoming less enamored with Israel. I think there's probably less popularity with evangelical Christianity amongst younger right wingers, even, evangelical Christianity is kind of like outmoded. And that's like the biggest source of Christian Zionism in America. And then also like the thing that Tim Pool wasn't saying is that a lot of his ideas give rise or like lead people down the pathway towards just outright anti-Semitism on the right. And a lot of those anti-Semites aren't Christian Zionist anti-Semites. And when they're not Christian Zionist anti-Semites, they tend to be anti-Israel, just like outright neo-Nazi adjacent anti-Semites like Nick Fuentes. And, we've seen his tensions with Nick Fuentes too. So he doesn't want to acknowledge that shows like his are like a stepping stone towards shows like Nick's, which is also making people anti-Israel. Like he plays a role in this. Not that I'm mad he's making people anti-Israel, but like on the right, it's not like they're moving towards better things. They're moving towards like neo-Nazism and then like isolationism.
You said so much right there, but that is a huge part of it. One, we showed this graph earlier that, yes, they're correct that anti-Israel sentiment is on the rise. It's now a majority opinion, according to Pew. 53% of U.S. adults have a negative view of Israel. The increase of Republicans aged 18 to 49 is now it's at 50% in that demographic.
35 to 50 it moved since 2022.
15-point increase in negative views for Israel for that age group of Republicans. And then you see how it's barely moved at all if you're an older Republican, just to balance that out.
The biggest psychos in the world, frankly, the 50-plus Republicans. But look at how much even the 50-plus Democrats.
Oh, my gosh.
43 to 66. 2/3 Democrats have negative views of Israel. 2/3
of Democrats over 50. And it's higher among Democrats at all, right?
Good on the Democrats, 18 to 49, that were already 62% before that. But 71 now. I mean, and this is a party led by two folks. One who explicitly said, my job is to keep Democrats pro-Israel.
Yep. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who's in bed with AIPAC as well. And
they're so bad they can't even do that right.
They can't. I mean, and I made this point earlier with Prem Talker. If the Democrats are all in on popularism, like Matt Iglesias wants them to be back on, just follow what the polls say is popular. Here you go. Here's a gimme. But they're not interested in that. And I also love how Tim Pool represents the right's opinion on this with isolationism, but the left is anti-Israel for, I don't know, whatever reasons. He doesn't address that he also had Nick Fuentes and Kanye West on his show, who are virulent anti-Semites, and you have Candace Owens, also anti-Semitic, who's peddling this kind of stuff to the base. Or at least he didn't address it right there. But he might later. Okay, well, but Netanyahu was more than willing to meet with him, and apparently Dave Rubin, according to Jewish Insider, who reported on this, that was a part of this meeting, because what people need to understand is that Israel likes anti-Semites, because the more anti-Semitism that they engender, the more justification that they can say, this is why we need an ethno-state. This is why we need to keep the hordes of Arab people out of our state. We need to maintain this demographic majority. They benefit from that kind of thing.
If there's no anti-Semitism, there's no reason for Israel to exist. Let's just play a little bit more of this, and then we can go some other stuff.
Gen Z support for Israel. Is there no pro-Israel champions that I really see? I talk about Israel a lot. I'm a raging Zionist, but I don't see a whole lot of other people who have a firm understanding of the history and the context.
Most people can't make a cogent argument that that young people find compelling as to why we should.
Which is why on the right it's, sure, Israel can do its thing, don't care. And on the left, it's down with Israel. So I actually, here's a question for you guys. Can you, honest question, this is not a gotcha, because I'm looking for a real answer. And for those that are listening, comments, can you name a prominent, high profile, large following, I'm talking like a podcast with millions of listeners, who is staunchly pro-Israel, advocating very heavily for Israel?
Ben Shapiro.
Someone who's Gen Z?
No, anybody in the podcast space.
Dennis Prager.
Sorry, anyone in the IDW, the Weinstein brothers? What are you talking about? Who? Barry Weiss?
Ben Shapiro, Barry Weiss, every cable anchor, Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, except some on MSNBC.
Tim Pool, I would have put that in. I mean, we'll get into some of that a little bit later. But
I will say they abandoned the previous point, which was can you give a good reason why people should? The only reason that he gave was Matt said previously was that just a lazy analogy to fist fight, like getting jumped outside of like the local saloon, I guess, in an old Western or whatever. And then they kind of revisited that, like, hey, like, well, like, why should Gen Zers be on board with Israel with all of the things we just mentioned? And then they were just like, well, who are the Gen Z far right influencers who would get them on board? Not like addressing the central premise of like, why would you be?
And
Right.
they weren't even looking for a Gen Z name. They're just like, is there anyone that's pro-Israel? It's like, what? Are you out of your
There's a few
mind?
people, but they're going insane.
Yeah. And what Matt was looking up earlier was because I saw this, it reminded me of this part of my conversation with Tim Pool from nearly 2 years ago at this point, where that very tension that you describe here, Binder, came up about their vehement opposition to the support for Ukraine, but and how, like, if they're isolationists, that should also extend to Israel. This is that exchange.
Also unclear to me if Higbee himself is pro-Ukraine. He might be like the Douglas Murray type. So I just want to put that in there.
Right, where Palestinians are defending themselves, and then it's, oh my gosh, they are just it's completely symmetrical. Israel and Palestine, these are two actors just battling it out.
So you're in favor of intervention there?
I would love to fund the Palestinians so that they were able to have a better
You are
life
to the
for
right
themselves.
of me on foreign policy.
Well, we already fund Israel, dude.
Yeah.
Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
Then you're in favor of funding military.
No.
We fund the Iron
Me
Dome.
literally saying,
we fund their
I
military-industrial
don't know
complex.
anything enough about it.
Then if
and
it's
I
your
lean against
principle and you're
intervention.
anti-war, then you should be saying that we should cut Israel funding for Israeli
Or I can say
defense
simply,
right now.
I lean. That's why I said 99%. I'll say I absolutely lean against providing military aid to Israel. I just don't know. I will say.
So there you go. But let's get back to, I guess, this part, because there's a point where he tries to blame some of the anti-Israel sentiment on funding, right? Is that a part of this where he says the Qatari op part? I was just reading that. That might be the beginning. We don't need to get to it, but according to Jewish Insider, who wrote up this article, Poole argued that there is a Qatari op to manipulate social media algorithms to make anti-Semitic and anti-Israel episodes appear to receive far more views than, say, tips for picking up women, in order to incentivize podcasters and YouTubers to produce more anti-Semitic content. Netanyahu, however, was non-committal in his response, saying only that it's possible. No, part of why those videos are doing well is because they are some of the most horrific images that you will ever see in your life. Bones and flesh, just like in piles, because people can't identify the level of slaughter. Children with their heads blown off, fathers wailing over the carcass of their toddler. Yeah, that's why people are clicking on those things, because they are inflammatory, but because of the violence that's being inflicted upon these people in this genocide.
Here's just another. I got actually a bunch of clips here, but here's just a little bit earlier from this in the same section. Tim laying it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Last night I wasn't here. I got late word that I was invited to a private roundtable meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Interesting. I didn't remember. Did we get that invite?
No, I did not get that invite. And I just want to remind people that Tim was caught victimized, getting millions and millions of dollars from the Russian government. That
he now thinks that might be a lie. He's sort of denying that. We'll have to get into that,
well,
but of course we know it's not.
In court documents, it's pretty clear. That broke after when I had that conversation with him. That was June 2023, so prior to October 7th. He didn't know anything about Israel at that time, but was very anti-Ukraine. We find out later that he was taking Russian money. I wonder if his position on Israel is influenced by anything at all. I mean, he did just meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. That seems curious to me.
It's interesting they had his contact information.
Yeah.
But what's called Chatham House rules, for those that are not familiar, this means that you cannot reveal anybody who attended, nor attribute anything to any one individual, as they can deny it, and they would. However, what I love about what the White House is currently doing, when you bring together a bunch of influencers and podcasters who don't know much about journalism culture, whatever you want to call it, not that we respect it tremendously, most people didn't know what Chatham House meant. So
can you again? Don't need to take it off the screen. Just a reminder: we just played a clip of him saying, "I don't know much about it." The recipient of our top military amount of military aid, Israel.
funny because they bring us into the Blair House, which is where Netanyahu was staying, and immediately people are walking around with their cameras, their phones up. They actually took our phones from us, and I legit thought they would maintain Chatham House rules, meaning you can't quote the prime minister, you can't quote his officials and the other people who were there, but you can report what was said generally. If you wanted an official quote on a specific matter, you would then ask an official once the meeting was wrapped, and they'd provide you the exact quote. Or they would just say outright, like, we haven't put our quotes on that one.
The Chatham House rule. So he's accusing the fact that Jewish Insider had got leaks about what was said in this meeting of violating Chatham House rules.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of how he would react if, like, I don't know, some journalist was like, yeah, Chatham House rules, I didn't report that. Like, who cares? What are you talking about, Chatham House rules? Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
Sounds like he's a little mad it got out.
But what's funny to me is Tim Pool, like, obviously there's a video of you saying, hey, do you want to fund Israel? And it's like, I just put forward my credibility as I'm very anti-war, but I haven't considered whether we should be sending arms to Israel. I'll have to get back to you on that. There's a couple instances if you search, because Tim put up this tweet, which was Israel derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
And you can just put that up.
Israel defense syndrome over here.
Sorry, you're not on.
Israeli defense syndrome. Oh, there we got it. No.
No. Sorry.
It's all right. We're still working on this.
No, that's not.
Okay, but either way.
Tim Pool himself has. Go back. Israel, USS Liberty derangement syndrome, which is anytime one of his co-hosts brings up the USS Liberty, which was when Israel bombed an American ship in 1967.
Yep.
Tim Pool loses his mind. Here, go wide shot, Russ.
Why does he do that?
This is the first I've heard of the USS Liberty that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, God, no, don't even do it.
1967, during the Israeli Six-Day War, they accidentally torpedoed, or they shot down a...
Yeah, but depending on who you ask, it's not an accident. That's like a whole can of worms of weird Jewish stuff.
Let's jump to this next story.
Okay. There's one there, and I got another one here, actually, too. And we'll get into what actually happened there.
He wants to move on so quickly, and also was meeting with Netanyahu and has previously taken money from foreign governments that comported with his coverage.
Isn't this the sort of thing independent media should not be unafraid to talk about? This was another one that posted by Halal Flow.
Dude, I'm concerned with having American aircraft carriers over there. Like, what I keep being told about the USS Liberty. That's something with the Israeli government.
No, you should.
No. Wait.
You should be careful about that.
Allegedly, the Israeli Air Force jet fighter aircraft.
I mean, they did end up paying out the American government.
So I'm concerned, like, false flag operation, like a missile comes out of Gaza and hits one of our aircraft carriers, but it was actually an Israeli missile. I don't want. We should get out of there.
It doesn't. But let me stop you there. It doesn't matter where the missile comes from.
What?
That's weird, huh?
I think that was Halal Flow with that edit there. But yeah, 1967, this is Ilan Pape's most recent book. Actually, it might not even be the most recent one. One of his recent books, Lobbying on Both Sides of the Atlantic. The carte blanche had limits, which were breached when the Israeli Air Force bombed an American spy ship called Liberty, killing 34 Navy personnel and wounding more than 100. Israel apologized, explaining it was as a case of mistaken identity, scarcely plausible, given that the Star-Spangled Banner flew high on the deck. AIPAC realized that it could not prevent President Johnson from admonishing Israel in public for assaulting the ship. All it could do was damage control, as it was clear that even the usually pro-Israel mainstream media would find it hard to swallow the Israeli explanation. Israel's reasons for attacking the ship are still debated today. It probably had to do with information the spy ship was able to collect that might have tarnished Israel's international reputation. Most scholars assume that the ship had gathered intelligence about an Israeli massacre of Egyptian soldiers. Israeli massacres, a thing that they do a lot. Of Egyptian soldiers, and about the expulsion of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, which Israel wanted to conceal. But we still need further substantiation of this reason. And the most important task for AIPAC was to dissuade members of Congress who wanted an official inquiry from making this demand a goal they achieved. So the reason we don't know, and why Destiny can say, like, oh, actually that's anti-Israel people, like, even they go crazy with it. The reason we don't know is because of the Israel lobby.
Right. He says it's a Jewish thing. No, it's actually a U.S. national security, like military industrial complex deep state thing.
Who Tim Pool met with. That's the reason we don't know the answer to who shot that ship in the fucking Mediterranean.
And I'm opening it up in just a sec, but I just want to make this one point before I forget. And I did just forget. Okay, keep going. I had it. Go ahead, Brandon. Damn it. What was the point?
I was just going to say, I think, he tried to make it seem like he's upset about both sides, like anti-Israel sentiment on the left, anti-Israel sentiment on the right. But I think this is mostly about what's going on in his own space, like the right, and how many people like Candace Owens have shifted away from, what was apparently the right-wing status quo position on Israel to carve out themselves parts of these audiences who are getting more and more explicitly anti-Semitic as they fall further and further down these rabbit holes. Like you mentioned, he drew this dichotomy between like videos about like picking up women and videos about like anti-Israel or anti-Semitic sentiment on the right. But in my mind, those two things are linked, because you start out on that pipeline looking at those pickup artist type videos, those kinds of like incel adjacent videos, and it's only a hop, skip, and a jump away from like, well, actually Jewish people are the ones who are fomenting feminism in like Western society to like weaken the social fabric of our society to make it easier to take over. Like they're producing that content and they're starting their viewers on the first step down that path, and then getting frustrated when they move past them, and they getting frustrated when they move further to their right. And like when he posted about that meeting, it's not that people with like Palestinian flags were yelling at him that got him upset, because he's used to that. It was people with names like Red Pill Central and like, the Suave Groiper that was yelling at him in his mentions. I don't know if that's a real person, but
it sounds like it could be though.
Yeah,
that's who's
Pepe
mad at him.
meme.
People in his mentions yelling for him to debate Nick Fuentes about Israel. Like he doesn't like having to feel those things from the right, because like, people just find that it's an insult to their political ideology if you question them from like further to the position they are.
Yeah, and what I was I just remembered what I wanted to say about this. I think that's a great point. The right-wing media space has very little respect for their audience. They think they can keep feeding them slop and control how they react. But right now, like we had a caller yesterday who said that her brother has moved from being extremely pro-Israel to being really anti-Semitic and reading Hitler. And I would not be shocked if these are the kinds of people that listen to Tim Pool. But you got to ask questions about why Tim Pool is meeting with a top world leader, again, the Hitler of our time, currently committing genocide, and I guess revealing it. But it reminds me of Joe Rogan, where he has all of these deep state people on, or he has his tech oligarchs on, his favorite, to launder their PR, which really kind of benefits the corporate network state that Donald Trump is trying to build. Rogan claims to engage in conspiracism and bring that to his audience, but a lot of the people he's been having on recently over the past few years are directly the subjects of the deep state, or part of the deep state or whatever, that would be engaging in those conspiracies. And so I do find it interesting that Tim Pool is kind of in that same vein right now.
There's this clip from Elephant Graveyard.
Yes.
This is Elephant Graveyard is a great YouTube channel. He did a video called how comedy became a dystopian imperial hell world. And this just drives that point quickly about the nature of Joe Rogan guests, and it slides in perfectly with Tim Pool's sort of pretensions towards being independent, but constantly getting money from governments like Russia and I guess media powwows with Bibi Netanyahu.
I would have been like them if I didn't have the access to the kind of conversations that I've had, if I didn't have the kind of mindset that I have.
The mindset.
My personality. Is just immune to bullshit.
He's got it all.
When bullshit hits me, I go, oh, I know what this is. I grew up without a dad.
Daddy.
I don't trust people. And the people that haven't experienced that, I can understand why they formed the conclusions that they did, because I could have been them. I 100% could have been them.
Well, thank God Joe's mommy bought hamburger that fateful night. Or Joe could have ended up a guy with the biggest mainstream media platform on earth, being easily used and exploited by weird billionaires and grifters, and allowing it to happen because he's just so desperate for love and validation on account of that dad hole. It's crazy to think there's a multiverse thing out there where the #1 comedy podcast doesn't have guests like some comic book villain, evil rich guy, all these nut job billionaire dweebs, and like, I don't know, a guy literally from the CIA.
Yep.
That's on like once a month for some reason. And also like the entire government, basically. Could any of these people have tried to influence the way he thinks? Nah, man, he grew up without a dad, so you don't even have to take that question into consideration.
Incredible.
No, I mean that's like a great point. Like if the Joe Rogan podcast didn't exist for the CIA and politically well-connected people to launder their propaganda through, the CIA would invent the Joe Rogan podcast. Mm-hmm. And I'm not 100% sure that they did not. Like those are the two, like the Joe Rogan podcast and the Alex Jones podcast are the two podcasts that are like, very questionable in terms of their relationship with dispelling conspiracy theories as opposed to promoting status quo friendly ones, right? Like Joe Rogan's podcast is like, Joe Rogan's like a sheep's idea of a free thinker, like, and he has like he just has the illusion of somebody who like is very considered in what he's thinking about. It's very like, it's just crazy how many people like just tune directly into propaganda on the Joe Rogan podcast. They're like,
but that's what he's commodified. The everyman thing that obscures what he's actually selling to people.
But Alex Jones is so like considered about it that he literally has made the same accusation that a guy named David Icke is doing to conspiracies, what he's actually doing, which John Rotson, the great British journalist, has a book called Them, where he goes with Alex Jones to Bohemian Grove. But Alex Jones called David Icke a guy who's putting a turd in the punch bowl of good conspiracy theories. That's what these guys are doing. It's the same way like the farcical Epstein client list and all that stuff. It's a turd in the punch bowl and all that stuff so they can move on. Let's just do a little bit more, because this is like the part about the Qatari op, just to drive it home about Tim Pool and his audience that we sort of alluded to.
Right.
About this stuff, and he's going to say, I can't speak too much on the nuclear deals, blah, blah, blah. Considering this was Chatham House and it was expected whatever he said was going to come out, I didn't see anything really substantive. However, in the story, they say, Poole expressed concerns about increased anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the pro-Trump podcasting space, according to sources in the room, so they weren't there. Poole famously had Kanye West on his podcast, and the rapper walked out mid-interview after Poole pushed back against anti-Semitic comments. Responding to Poole, Netanyahu said that the reason he invited the group is to meet with him. To me? Poole argued that there is a Qatari op to manipulate social media algorithms to make anti-Semitic and anti-Israel episodes appear to receive far more views than, say, tips for picking up women, in order to incentivize podcasters and YouTubers to produce more anti-Semitic content. Netanyahu, however, was non-committal in his response, saying that's only possible. Fake news!
How dare you, Tim?
Absolute fake news. It's close to reality, but this is what they do, okay? First, the person who was there clearly wasn't there to ask somebody who then conveyed incorrectly what I actually said.
What were you saying, Vinder?
It's fake, absolute fake news, but also close to reality? What?
Whew.
I guess he's going to explain, but I'm dying to know what could possibly be fake news, but close to reality.
Me too.
It's just a liminal space. It's very complex.
I said there has been a report released from pro-Israel sources alleging Qatar is funding bots and operations to promote anti-Israel content. Is there any evidence that's true? And he said, I don't know. It's possible. That's what happened. I did not say they actually were doing that, because I don't know that they're actually doing it. However, I did, to a variety of people, express what I've expressed on this show, that there are clearly bots that are anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. That is not to say that people who are critical of Israel don't exist, or that no one is critical of Israel.
That's about enough.
Every accusation is a confession. I'm just like in awe of how much he's revealing here, to be honest with you. First of all,
his issue with the report is that he said what he said, but he phrased it in the form of a question instead of a statement, which is, it's relevant, sure, but it's also the real meat of what's being reported. Like, that's the point, is the question he asked and then what Netanyahu's response was, which is in that article, honestly.
Well, but also just the idea that Netanyahu, it's included in here, said the reason he invited the group is to meet with Poole. Why would that be the case? If there isn't some pre-existing relationship, I'm open to the idea that there isn't one, and that just perhaps he's a big fan. But we already know that Tim Pool has taken money from the Russian government. Unwittingly, he was victimized by the millions. We get it. But he's done so. And
he's a proven mark, in other words.
And so Netanyahu specifically wanted to meet with skateboard enthusiast Tim Pool on his visit to the United States.
Oh, I want to know how to do those kickflips, Tim. Please.
Yeah. And also that he's telling on himself with the Qatari op. Oh, yeah, right. That gives the IDF morale to see such a strong man in the United States with his skate park. This is what they're fighting for with Western civilization. When they bring up Qatar, it's because they're upset that Qatar partially funds Al Jazeera, which is one of the only news outlets that has the resources to document Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. So again, this is another accusation as a confession thing. Even bringing up Qatar to Netanyahu, to me, indicates that it's like, well, if I take Israeli money, I'm just speculating, if I take Israeli money, I mean, it's because there's Qatar on the other side doing the same thing. Anyway, that was meatier than I thought it would be. Kind of interesting. Just throwing that out there.
I mean,
maybe we're thinking Netanyahu wanted to meet YouTuber Tim Pool or journalist Tim Pool, but really he wanted to meet iTunes chop-tarting music artist Tim Pool. He's a big fan of Tim Pool's music. Maybe that was it. Yeah.
I still remember talking to you before you debated Tim Pool and knowing that Israel was a sore spot. And at this date, I can't remember what it was that made that evident. But it was obvious, and it's nice to know that, he's taking meetings that he thought were under Chatham House rules, but they get reported anyway.
I mean, it's funny because Tim Pool's on the defensive here. Obviously, he's received pushback from this meeting. I think, the non-silver lining, the gray lining is it's largely from like a growing like anti-Semitic portion of the right that is becoming more and more vocal, and they're becoming more and more vocal as they become more and more dissatisfied with Donald Trump's actions, and are able to recruit more people who become dissatisfied with Donald Trump's actions and are looking for an easy explanation for why he's behaving this way, why he's ruining people's lives with tariffs, why he's getting rid of the Department of Education, and therefore your little brother is not going to have occupational therapy at school anymore. Like, people are going to be looking for reasons why this is happening, and the far right just has no problem platforming anti-Semites, and that's going to be their go-to explanation. Every time Trump pulls out Netanyahu's seat, they're giving them more evidence of like a global conspiracy that is actually just like, no, it's just neoliberalism. It's just the same old thing that the left is always talking about.
And you see how they package it to attack the left. Like Tim Pool saying, well, you got a smaller portion on the right that's anti-war, which is a good thing and it's defensible. But then you have all these people on the left that are they hate Israel. Yeah. And Netanyahu sees that. And like all these, like the Candace Owens rump that is going anti-Semitic as a result of this, they will be used as a cudgel to attack, like they already are, the protesters as anti-Semitic themselves.
Well, I mean, they know that like there's going to be a new market for like anti-Semitic content because, people are going to not be exposed to the left critique of Israel on modern platforms. They're not going to be exposed to the left critique of Israel. This is always the way in which the center empowers fascists, because they're going to hold up like people like Candace Owens as like the face of the pro-Palestinian, the anti-Israel movement in America, because she's vocally anti-Semitic. And so people who feel strongly and are uninformed about the Palestinian situation are going to see Candace Owens as the only person who's speaking to this genocide, the only person, and that's going to make her a more attractive person. They're just relying on this idea that they can call everything anti-Semitic and that they can platform clearly like Hitler adjacent commentators to like just tamp down on anti-Israel sentiment. And maybe it will have some of that effect, but the alternative effect that it will definitely have is that it will make more people feel like the only acceptable way to critique Israel is to be actually anti-Semitic, like Candace Owens is, and that just creates a market for anti-Semitism. It creates more anti-Semites, which we, like Emma said, it's like what they want, because that's the core value proposition of Israel. But it does just increase the total number of anti-Semites out there.
Just a quick sentence to bolster that is that Candace Owens is a top 5 political podcast in the country. I saw that the other day. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you just said that too, because what I'm going to say is that I think everyone should do more to remind, or not even remind, to inform, because they probably don't even realize it or know. Everyone needs to do more to inform everyone that the reason Candace Owens has the platform she has is thanks to the biggest right-wing pro-Israel podcaster on the planet, Ben Shapiro, who funded her for years and made her the superstar on the right she is today.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.